Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show, a weekly show designed for you as a leader and manager to get the results you've always wanted. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show so you can never miss an episode and share it with anyone else who might get the benefit. Right, without any more delay, let's get on with this week's show. Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. Hope everyone's keeping well this week and has delivered the results they wanted, or are working to deliver the results they wanted with, guess who? Of course, the team that you've got around. Yeah, so this week, why not? Let's dive into the idea of teamwork being a dream work. Yep, a cheesy title, indeed it is. But I think it's very important that we all admit, as managers and leaders, that without anyone around us, without the teams that you've got, without the people that you call your team, you're very much a lone wolf going pretty much nowhere. They always say that the wolf makes the pack and the pack makes a wolf, and that's really is true when it comes to managing a team. It's important that you've got that. But what are the advantages and, of course, disadvantages of having a team? Well, fair enough. Let's think of the disadvantages first. Not that I'm a negative person, but let's start with the negatives. People are only playing for themselves a lot of the time. So if you haven't got a team and you've not got the real... When I say you haven't got a team, I mean you haven't got a team that's working well. You have people or individuals. They're always looking out for themselves. They come and do the bare minimum. You hear things like, that's not my job. They're in and out. You can see that in their eyes. They're almost looking at the clock when they arrive to say, when can I get away? They're looking at the door. They're wanting to go. And there may be... And I know this is those areas that people have an argument around is, maybe they're just there for the pay. Is that the only reason they turn up? And of course, I'm sure there'll be people emailing in saying, well, do you do your job just for fun? And of course, people need the money. That's the thing that gets them there. But there is a difference. There is people that we know who will go the extra mile. They will push further than ever. So the disadvantage of poor teamwork is exactly that. You get a lot of bare minimum, not my job, just doing it, doing what the system says. And there is some businesses that are very system driven. There's lots of examples of where the system is definitely rigid and makes it very, very awkward. Things like in the UK, the National Health Service is a very big system-driven beast of an organisation. But within there is very much good teams that will go the extra mile, will push forward. In fact, they're almost held back, you get the feeling, by the teams' systems. Sorry, not by the teams, by the systems. The teams are good. The people are good. They really care. But the systems are holding them back. So the disadvantage there is you get people who are only there. They don't see the bigger picture. They're really not getting the idea of it. So on the flip of that, what's the advantages of a good team? Well, of course, you get engaged people. A good team is an engaged team. You get a happy team. You get a team that wants to do something for people. You can tell on the sports field when a real team clicks. They might not be the most highly paid. In fact, they might be amateurs. You see many amateur sports that really click. They've got each other's back. They're looking out for one another. When that going gets tough, as the saying says, the tough get going, they get at it. They want to do it. Big thing I always talk about on this podcast, people get results. They deliver results because they've got the advantage of a good team around them. They're very creative. A good team gives a very safe environment to be able to create ideas and to deliver on those ideas and to push forward, not be happy with the status quo. They'll stay together. They'll click and stay together a lot of the time because they feel part of a bigger area, bigger thing, a bigger vision almost. And that's a real advantage of a good team. So what can you do? What do you do as a manager? How do you do this? Well, first thing, you've got to start thinking about how do you support that team? When you go in there, how do you actually support it? You're the leader. You're the person who's going to do this team. Now, sometimes you're going to inherit a team that maybe is not perfect. I've got in my past jobs many moons ago, good individuals, but we're a poor team. Now, some of those individuals, they needed to leave, and that is unfortunately going to be part of your job, but actually it's fortunate sometimes because you might not want those people. They do need to leave. But you've got to make sure that you have got an idea of hiring the right people, getting the right team around those people, developing the people, giving them an idea of supporting your team through developing the people. And to support the team, you make sure that you're fair with them, that you give them the accountability, you tell them what they need to deliver, but you hold them to account. Doesn't mean it's all, rainbows and unicorns in these teams. It's all around the idea of you're giving them things, they know the path, they're there, they deliver results, and you hold them to account for those results, so you're supporting the team that way. You give them a clear idea of succession. You want a team around you that wants to push, develop. They don't or maybe all want your job, but you can see that they want to go further. And you might unfortunately lose some of those people if you don't get the succession right, because if they're not there for the long term and they don't see a succession, even though you want to do that, and they feel that there is nothing for them, they will leave. So you need to be able to clear the path for their succession, give them a path, help them get there. So you're supporting them all the way. So by supporting that team, and then build that idea of a team relationship in the culture, spend time together, get to know them as people, so you understand what's going on in their world outside of work. What is the things that they're really passionate about that drives them? What are the things that they're not passionate about that turns them off? It's really important to understand that flick between the two. And moving from supporting the team, what do you do when you're managing the team? How do you manage them well? Well, you've got to look at the rewards. We joked earlier about pay. That's one of the rewards, but there's lots of other rewards that will get people through the door, but will encourage them to perform. Some of it might be bonuses. Yeah, of course, bonuses around. Let's not kid ourselves, bonuses in some organisations are the big thing. Some sales organisations will be built on that idea of turnover and rewards for doing that. But not a lot of them are in there. There may be lots of other things that are less about the tangible, but more about the involvement. So rewards can be involvement in bigger team activities. Rewards can be talking around longer term, keying back into that idea of succession planning. You've got to, as a manager, involve them all. If you've got a team of people, involve them in what's going on. If that's decisions, then you may look at the idea of accountability and make sure that people understand that in regards to what you're involving them in. But it's good for having time together as a team, involving them in some of the decisions, both big and small, so you've got that consensus, you're building it. Yes, you're the boss. Yes, you've got to make the big decision sometimes, but you're making sure that they're involved. Enforcing this accountability, back to my idea of holding people account to support the team, as a manager, you've still got to make sure that their accountability is there because the buck stops with you, the deliverables got to be there with you. So you've got to make sure that you have got an accountable and forced accountability. That doesn't mean that you're beating people up. It means that they all understand, as a group, we all deliver together, we all win together, we all fail together. In a sporting analogy, if somebody lets the goal in at one end by, dropping it or whatever, there's still the whole team loses. It don't matter. You can blame everyone else, but it's still going to be the team that loses. And that runs down to the idea of hitting the numbers through others, making sure the team know what numbers they've got to hit, making sure they're hitting them. And of course, making sure that you as a manager are engaging and are morally a gatekeeper for them, so they can come and talk to you about things. The idea of the one-to-ones and the feedback obviously keys nicely into this idea of being a manager. You've got to give them directions sometimes. But of course, that directions will all be underpinned by a shared vision that you'll communicate and common goals that you've communicated to that person. So the vision and the common goals all linked to the numbers mean you're doing your job as the manager and managing that team. And of course, from that, you've got to go to that idea of how do you then build this team. So how do you make sure from the start all the way through that you've done the right thing? So let's step back a stage. So you're lucky enough to have got yourself a blank canvas. The first thing you're going to be doing is, how do I hire the right person? How do I hire into this team? As I spoke before, you can have great players, but if they're not a good team, it don't work. Very difficult. In interviewing stages, and we've all been in interviews, I'm sure, we don't all come over as, this person who's going to not get in with everyone. They're obviously going to be selling themselves as being the best thing ever. So how do you, when you hire, Make sure you've got that cultural fit. It can be very difficult. Something to really work on though. How do you do it? How do you test it? It sometimes means keeping a probation going. Have a good probation period. And if they're not working, have that honest conversation with them. Because if they don't fit, they're not going to be happy and you're going to have a poor team. But when you're getting them in there, what do? How do you onboard them well? How do you make sure you've got the onboarding right? And of course, the better onboarding means you get better results earlier. But a good onboarding also makes sure that you've put some milestones in for them so they understand where they need to go. They understand what they've got to do. There's going to be a lot of information when you onboard people. But have some structured approach. Make them feel that when they're onboarded, that they're welcome to the team. And that means getting the team that they're going to be working with and around them and making sure that they understand the part that they play. When you've onboarded them, you've always got to train them. Sometimes you're bringing in very highly skilled people and you think, well, they'll know all this. The CV says they know it all. But everyone's different. And making sure they fit to the culture means sometimes the idea of training. So they understand how to deal with conflict in your business or in your organisation. How you're going to work with them. So putting in those standard one-to-ones with them, probably more at the beginning, so they understand that. Make sure that they understand what the feedback looks like and how you're going to hold everyone else to account as well as your teammates. So they feel that they're being held to account themselves because they understand the shared vision and they understand the common goals and they understand the numbers that they've got to hit, but they understand how they fit. Some people have not done this, but there is an idea of a charter that you come together and you say, how do we build a charter together with a team? I've done exercises with teams that weren't functioning of what was working well and what wasn't working well. And when you dug under it, a lot of the time, the team didn't really trust each other. They weren't working collaboratively. And those are things you can put into charters. You can get agreement and say, right, we're going to work on this idea. They didn't communicate very well. So again, a lot of times when things fall down, it can be communications which knock on to ideas of not cooperating and not having your people involved. So sometimes you can call it a charter, other times it's ways of working. However you want to do it, it's a good way to get people to think around how they will put that together, how the team will work together in the future with this new person that you're bringing on board. Of course, sometimes you don't have new people on board. So if you're inheriting a team that's there, you need to sit down with them and agree what works and what doesn't work. And I'll tell you, you'll soon find out because they'll come through the door and go, this isn't working, there's a silo here, that person's doing that. A lot of time it's venting, a lot of time it's getting off the chest. A lot of time you're going to have to sit back and listen without doing anything at first, especially when you're new to a role like that. Don't jump to the first person who knocks on your door and says, that whatever they say is true. You want to trust what they're saying. You want to work with that person collaborative, but there's always underlying issues that have got them to that point that they're talking about it. On the other side, if you get a totally perfect team, everything's really good, the skeptic in me says, well, is it too good? Is something underneath the water that I've not seen? So it's well worth doing that. And as of course, if you are building this team, you've got to say, well, what does a good culture look like? Again, what do we expect our team goals to be? Have we set some good KPIs or have you set KPIs as a leader? Remember when any team fails, it lands on you as the leader. You're ultimately accountable for that team. So if they're missing the KPIs, do the team understand what the KPIs are? Do they align to the organisation's KPIs? Are the goals you give them individually really goals that they can enhance and do something with? When you're setting people's individual goals, not just the team, but individual goals, have they got themselves a SMART goal that's very much around being measured, that's actually realistic, that's on a time basis, all those things that you know about. And has the team itself got the goals? What are the overarching team goals? A lot of time it's very straightforward KPI decks that everyone knows what they've got to do. It's going to be around safety, it's going to be around quality, it's going to be around delivery, it's going to be around costs. Those are the things. It could be environment. There's a lot more nowadays in business that talks about cultures and engagements. How do we judge that? And that's a good idea to look at a culture, and the idea is the values of the business. But what's the team values? What does the team live by? What does it expect? What does it expect from each individual member? Again, when you're getting to know people, you get to know what will drive some people to help any minute and what will turn people off and go the other way. Does the team's mission and culture, what does that really mean? We talk about team culture, but, are they working together? You don't have to be the best friends at work. Let's get that straight. Work is work. You've got your friends, you've got your social life, you've got everything going on outside. It's nice to have friends at work. It's good to have a best friend at work or a friend you can open up to at work. Nothing wrong with that. But you don't all have to be best friends. You've got to be best at yourself. You've got to work as a person. And let me be honest with you, most people I work with have really got good relationships with the people around them. There may be tension. That's not a bad thing. There may be fallouts. Again, shows they've got passion. You've still got to watch it. Don't go past a point. But you've got to understand that when you've got some operational guidelines around the culture and around your team, it makes it so much easier. And if there's a conflict, you can obviously resolve that through a process. So you can talk around understanding each other better. You can avoid people making assumptions, because most of the time mistakes are around the assumptions. They say the assumption is the mother of all failure. People assume this is what that person meant, or they assume that's their intentions, or they assume the ego was cheating, or they assume. And when you look to and you break it down, most of the time people are not. There may be some egos, but most of the time conflict resolution is around sharing some information, understanding each other, listening, and obviously getting to that idea of being able to deal with the situation as an adult and push forward, knowing what the vision is, knowing what the goals are, knowing what the KPIs are, makes it so much easier for them to deliver. And of course, to wrap up that idea of building a team is looking at the roles and responsibilities. Are they clear? Are they defined? Do we know who does what and where? If not, is there a way that we should be making sure that people do know that? And that also helps to reduce conflict. And it also helps you as a manager make sure people are accountable. If you know what people are doing, it's a good idea to know what people are doing, then you can hold them to account to what's meant to be done. If you've got a supply chain or an engineering or a safety person or an operations manager, you know what they or should be delivering. They know what they've got to deliver. So it's easier to hold that person or that area leader or that team leader or whatever level it is to be accountable for the deliverables if they know that. If people don't really know what roles and responsibilities and it's very blurred, then it can cause conflict, which again comes back to the idea of understanding and listening, avoiding the assumptions and sharing information better. So that's sort of looking at when you think about a dream work and a teamwork that makes it. There's lots of things that are outside of that, but you've got to support your team. You've got to build the team and you've got to manage the team. So you've got to understand those points that making that team work. And of course, by doing that, you get people on board, you get delivering the results you need, you get a lot of creative ideas, you get a happy, engaged team. You can feel it when you walk through the door. So have a think about how your team works. It's a good time when you've listened to something like this just to step back from the line and think, does my team that I'm working with work? Is there lots of issues bubbling under the surface that I've been putting off and I should engage in? Is that around managing people's accountability? Do they understand what the shared vision is? Do they get what direction we're going in? Should I do a charter? Should I set people down and get them to understand? Have I onboarded the last person correctly? Or have I just left them in the corner with a laptop? Do I train people right? Do they understand what feedback means? Do they understand their accountability? Can they deal with conflict? And do you have a good culture that's going to push that forward? Well, as ever, I'm so keen to hear about what you've done with your teams in the past or what you'd like to do with them in the future. So please, if you can, drop me a line. The email address is managermattpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to engage in new and old topics around this subject or any other. And of course, feedback's a gift. So if there's any way I can improve, please send it to me. But one of the last things I'll leave you with today is whatever you learned today, take it away, have a think, and hopefully put it into action. There's no point in having words without doing something with it. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. Thanks for listening as ever. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful, and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider, as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.